promises lightly.
And there have been some that I've broken.
But I swear the days still left we walk in fields of gold. We'll walk in fields of gold. Many years have passed since those summer days upon the fields of barley. See the children run as the sun goes down among the fields of gold. You remember me when the west wind moves upon the fields of barley. You can tell the sun in his jealous sky that we walked in fields of gold, that we walked in fields of gold.
Our featured musician with us for this weekend is Brian Tate, who's just sliding in alongside us here and is going to play a bit of percussion in the next piece. The title of it is Hold Me, Rock Me, and this is one of Brian's compositions, a little quieter than some of the ones you're going to hear later this weekend. Hold Me, Rock Me.
Hold me, rock me, calm and easy. Hold me, rock me, deep and wide. Hold me, rock me in your arms. Oh, I got a home on the other side. Hold me, rock me, calm and easy. Hold me, rock me, deep and wide. Oh, hold me, rock me in your arms. Oh, I got a home on, I got a home on, I got a home on the other side.
Someday, gonna cross that river. Someday,
What a great choir, aren't they? Yeah, what a great choir director. This is, I'm so pleased to be here. The way this is working out is a little different for me. Usually if I come do a choir workshop, I'll work with a choir for maybe a full day or 2 days, and then we'll perform for an audience. And this is one of the pieces I brought as part of the music to offer all of you this weekend. And I'm pleased to say that I've had a grand total of about 6 minutes rehearsal with the choir that happened about 15 minutes ago. But they are so totally on top of it. And Nathan's going to do the solo on this piece. And Nathan's a terrific singer, as you'll see. And this is a stretch for him, because it's a little different stylistically than what he's used to. So we had about 45 minutes together where we just kind of played around with the song. And I said, "You want to do it tonight?" And Nathan said, "Sure." So that's totally great. Nathan's up for it. And we have Aiden on piano. We have Dave on sax, adding a little sax to the background. So that's great. This is all completely in the spirit of what gospel music is about. This is a song called "Movin' Up." It was taught to me by one of my teachers, Terrence Kelly, directly of the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir. And it's a rockin' piece. So put your hands together, put your voices together. Lots of room in the aisles to dance in if you feel so inclined. But don't be a polite audience for this one. Make some noise and let's have some joy out there. This is "Movin' Up."
Friends, that is the First Met Ensemble with Fran Paulet, Brian Tate, Aidan Miller, and did you know David Felton, one of our presenters, was there? Is that a soprano sax he was playing there? So, once more, let's show our appreciation tonight. Friends, we had a marvelous afternoon, and welcome to any who may be joining us tonight. I'm Alan Saunders, part of the ministry team here at First Met, and welcome to those who are joining us through live streaming as well. As we gathered this afternoon, we had just heard the news from yesterday about Marcus Borg, and so we have lit a candle in his memory, celebrating his life amongst us. We had heard the news about the Naramata Center and likewise lit a candle. Last year, we were most fortunate to have as a special presenter Phyllis Tickle. How many of you were here to hear her? Wasn't that excellent? Just this month, we received word that her husband Sam had died after a lengthy illness. And when I expressed our condolences, Phyllis got back to me saying it had been a lengthy illness. And so there's that sense of release and peace that comes with the prayer that that's for the individual and for all those who knew and loved him. And so we light a candle this night to remember Sam Tickle, or Phyllis Tickle's husband Sam, to remember Phyllis and the family and their circle of friends. Amongst the videos that you can see featuring Phyllis Tickle, there is one where she and tonight's presenter are having a marvelous interaction and appear to be thoroughly enjoying one another's conversation. And Peter Rollins tells me that it was Sam, her husband, was the one that he first met. And he said, "Oh, I know someone you really have to meet. You have to meet my wife." And from there, the friendship grew. And so it seems really fitting that this year Peter Rollins is a featured presenter for us. Peter's becoming well known through his books such as How Not to Speak of God, The Orthodox Heretic, and just off the press, The Divine Magician. Would you believe it? It's not out in Canada yet until February 1st, but guess what? It's in our bookstore. And one of the reasons we approached Peter was that when our moderator, Gary Patterson, invited over 100 United Church ministers to go to Greenbelt Festival, what I was hearing was this tremendous buzz about this person they had heard, Peter Rollins from Ireland. And so just before he comes and shares with us the first of two presentations tonight and then tomorrow morning, I'm going to invite Emily MacDonald, our parish nurse and health and wellness advocate, to lead us in prayer.
Let us join our hearts and minds in prayer. Let us pray. Blessed One, we come as seekers in this busy postmodern world, besieged by information, by difference, by constant change. We want unity and ease and are not sure what we believe. We seek your grace, your love, your very presence as we evolve in this fast-moving world. We ask that you bless those who lead us, who prick our rigid minds, and who motivate us to be open to new ways of experiencing you. Be our light. Be our way, be our hope. Bring us to new life in you. Amen.
Let's join a warm Canadian welcome to Peter Rollins.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? No? Yes? Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now? Can you understand me? That's always the problem. Honestly, I'm sorry. I think if people did understand me, they wouldn't listen to me. I think I get away with what I do. It's because I'm like this crazy Irish guy who just tells stories and people can't quite follow what I'm saying. But I was told that I should try to speak slowly. When I get excited, I kind of get fast, and you get 2 talks for the price of 1. But I'm going to try and keep slow. But if I get fast, I apologize. That's just the Irish way. We're very fast talkers. It's a real honor to be here. I've been doing this for a while now, writing and going to places to speak. And I kind of have to remind myself how lucky I am that I get to be part of things like this and meet wonderful people and get to challenge myself. Like when I'm speaking, I'm not speaking to you primarily. I'm speaking to myself, and to get the opportunity to come to this and to talk about important things and to challenge myself it's a great job, and I don't want to come here to get you to all agree with me and what I'm saying. Well, I do. I'd love you to all agree with me. The world would be a better place. In my mind, the world would be a better place if everybody thought like I did. I want lots of little Pete Rollinses running around the world, thinking like I do and seeing the world like I do. But more than that, I want to create an environment where we can wrestle together and think differently. Often, when you teach philosophy, I'm a philosopher in background, the first thing you have to do with students is you have to kind of encourage them not to agree or disagree with the thinker they're engaging with. Because to agree or to disagree is to take what you're hearing and fit it within what you already believe. So you hear something and you go, oh, I agree with that. And you slot that in. And you hear something else and you go, oh, I disagree with that. And you put it to one side. And so it seems like critical thinking, but it's kind of the opposite of critical thinking. It's just taking what you're already listening to and fitting it in with what you already have. What's more interesting is to say to the students, be disturbed and surprised by what you're reading. Don't judge them from your perspective, but judge yourself from their perspective. What do you look like from their angle? And more interesting things will happen. This is actually one of my concerns with some forms of interfaith dialogue, because you've got the traditional thing where if I meet someone who's different from me, well, the first reaction I have often is I want to make them into the same, right? If you're other, you have weird beliefs and practices, you uniting church people, right? Yeah. And you're a bit monstrous and weird, right? So I want to convince you that I'm right. I want to consume you. Literally, it's a form of consumption. I want to take your difference, bring it into my social body, break down your difference so that you become part of my social environment. Now, if I can't do that, the second thing I want to do then is vomit you out. Think of it like a child. A child is like puts things in her mouth and tastes them, and if they're pleasant, they consume them. If they're not, they spit them out. So I want to spit you out. I want to get rid of you. If I can't integrate you into my system, then push you to one side. Get rid of the otherness. But then there's the more thoughtful kind of engagement. One is tolerance, which is, okay, we can hang out. Just don't ever talk about your weird beliefs and practices, right? Keep those behind closed doors. I don't care what you do on a Sunday. You just don't talk about it, right? And we'll all be able to get on as normal. And that's a very common thing in a multicultural environment. And then, of course, the next step is potentially, well, you know what? Let's talk about our differences. And you know what? But beneath all of our differences, there's things that we share that are the same. Beneath the different streams that we're in, there is potentially an ocean of sameness beneath, and we find the places of agreement. But the problem I have with all 4 of those is, in all 4 of them, I'm right? In the first 3, I'm right and you're wrong. And in the 4th one, we're both right. Let's have tea and biscuits, right? Now, what's really frightening about people who are monstrous and weird and other is that at first I look at them and go, you're strange. And then I look at myself through their eyes and I go, oh my goodness, I'm strange. I'm monstrous. I'm weird. And I'm confronted with my own weirdness, the beliefs and practices that I think are just the way things are. That's just the way everybody does them. Encountering someone who brings their family up in a different way, or has different religious practices, or does, in something very, very different, can make me see myself and how weird I am. And that's why I think we're terrified of otherness sometimes. Not because you're different from me, but because you will expose that maybe I'm pretty strange, and that there's lots of things in me that I need to rethink. And so our fear of otherness is really a fear of the otherness within ourselves. So, I want to create an environment where we can wrestle, we can be surprised and disturbed, a place of conflict, right? Well, I want to fight. I'm Irish, that's why the Irish are God's chosen people. We love a fight, right? And that's key. There's an Irish comedian called Dylan Moran, who once said, war is not conflict, war is the inability to have conflict, right? So a war is what you do when you can't stand the difference. I just want to kill them. You just want to get rid of them. So a war is the very point when you can't stand to be in the same room and wrestle things through and fight things out. It's not, and they're kind of these things that seem opposite, which is complete peace, and then there's war. But somehow they're actually intertwined. And the healthy place is antagonism. Like if you're doing therapy, you go to a therapist and you shout at them and you tell them it's a waste of money, it's not working, whatever. And then at the end of the session, you go, see you next Tuesday. See you next Tuesday. Or an Irish pub is a perfect example. You go in, you say, oh, Seamus, how's it going? And it's brilliant. You have a few drinks and you just think each other are brilliant. We're best buddies, blood brothers, I'd give you my kids, take my children, have them, you're the best. And then a few more drinks and I hate you. I can't believe your mother can look at you in the face and not scream that she had you. You're terrible. I never want to see you again. And then, of course, at the end of the night, it's, okay, see you next Friday, right? It's like that's part of the dynamic, the conflict. The conflict is good and healthy. And actually, I want to touch on a little bit of that in this talk. So I want to encourage you to enter into that. Tonight is a little bit of the theory, and tomorrow is a bit of the practice. So they're kind of part one and part two. But I want to start with a story back from Northern Ireland, where I'm from. Because it was one of the tactics of the IRA at the time was they would plant a bomb in a shopping centre or whatever, and then they would phone up the police, and they would say, listen, we've planted an incendiary device, you got 5 minutes, you got 10 minutes or whatever to get everybody out of the place, right? And so this is something that happened a lot. So a story would go around, and I remember hearing it one time in school about this guy, Seamus, right, who dies and goes up to heaven. And he's at the pearly gates, and he's waiting there. And as he's waiting, St. Peter comes out, like, hurried and looks confused, and he's got this big book, right? Big book. Opens it up, says, Seamus, he says, this is the book of life. Like, your name's not in it. You're in the IRA. You're not getting in, right? And Seamus looks at St. Peter and goes, listen, you misunderstand. He says, I'm not trying to get in. You've got 5 minutes to get out, right? Now, that, I think, captures the heart of radical theology. And that's what I'm going to talk about, the theory and practice of what I call radical theology, which is a little bit different from the spiritual and religious. This is kind of a materialist Christianity, and I'll try and explain what that means. To start with, we should have an image, potentially, up here. Yes, there we go. Welcome to the Stalin Appreciation Society. No. I do want to talk about this. One time I did give this talk with this picture behind me, and I forgot to mention it. So everyone at the end was like, that was an interesting talk, but why did he have a picture of Stalin right behind him for the whole time? It's like, oh no. So remind me if I don't come back to this picture. But yeah, if you go around any graveyard, you'll see a phrase quite often on tombstones, and it says, gone but not forgotten. Right? It's a famous phrase, gone but not forgotten. And the idea is a simple one, that someone has passed, but we remember them. We mourn them. We think about the good times. And the example of Sam is a good one for me, because he is one of the reasons why, a part of the reason why I'm in America. When he first heard me speak, I just came over to do a conference in Nashville. And he was in the front row, and we actually did this religious gathering, and it was quite controversial or whatever, but he was loving it. And at the end, he comes out, he says, I'm nobody. He says, I'm nobody. You got to meet my wife. She's somebody. You've got to meet her. And he brought us together, and the guy had such humility. And it's partly about lighting a candle and remembering the people who have gone. You can turn the phrase around and you get into what's called the unconscious. And that is the phrase, forgotten but not gone. Right? Forgotten but not gone. So what does that mean? Well, that means sometimes when we have too much suffering and pain in our lives, we want to forget it. We want to throw ourselves into work, throw ourselves into relationships, throw ourselves into this or that, to forget the suffering because it's painful. Because something has happened in our lives, something has happened in your life that is traumatic. And so what you do is you forget it. But it doesn't go. It remains. It stays there. Not in your conscious mind, but deep down, it comes out in what's called the symptom. The symptom is this explosion that happens when you cannot speak your unpleasant truth. Because when you cannot speak your unpleasant truth, your truth will find unpleasant ways of speaking. Bursts of anger, where you suddenly cry for no reason, just watching an advert on TV, or any number of other ways. Something explodes in you. Now, this is something that we often ignore. We think that the little outburst, that's not us. That little thing that we do, that's not who we are. That's just something that we could cut out of our lives. That's something, that's a little problem that we have to work on. But within psychoanalysis, it's different. That is actually the site of your truth. And a good way of thinking about it is actually by looking at this poster. This poster was done, I think it was in 1948, by a talented graphic designer called Piotr Golub, I think. And what's interesting about it is it's exactly the same as every other propaganda poster of the time. You have this beautiful kind of image. There's Stalin standing, meeting these young, fit sailors with the ships behind. Just typical kind of propaganda poster. This got made, it got painted, and it was produced, actually it exists in some form. But before it was mass-produced, a censorship committee had one final look at it, and somebody suddenly was shocked. They said, this is an abomination. They called it diabolical. They immediately shipped the guy off to the gulags and had him executed, right, for this poster. And you go, what was it about this poster that the censorship committee suddenly freaked out about? Tried to make sure that this was never seen. Now, the images aren't that big, but if you look closely, and some of you might see this, does anybody see something weird? If you look closely, Stalin only has 3 fingers on his left hand, right? So either he's missing a finger, or he's hiding a finger, like he's giving the finger to the soldiers, he's missing a finger, hiding a finger, right? But it's kind of weird, and you go, what is this? Why would this young graphic designer, talented graphic designer, paint Stalin with only 3 fingers on his left hand? I mean, you know that you're going to get killed for that, right? So one of the answers is like, you know what? He mustn't, hands are very hard to draw, right? So he made a bit of a mistake. But that doesn't really ring that true, because not only would he have to be bad at drawing hands, he'd have to be bad at knowing that he was bad at drawing hands. It's one thing to draw a 3-fingered person because you can't do 4 fingers, but it's another to not notice, right? And then you go, well, was it a political statement? And you kind of go, well, that's hard because it doesn't actually fit with any, a political hand gesture in Russia. But a way of thinking about it is to think about it as a deliberate mistake. Now, this idea of deliberate mistake, up until 100 years ago, seemed ridiculous. How can you make a deliberate mistake? A mistake that you don't know you're making, but you still make. This is what's called the Freudian slip. You can see this poster potentially as a type of artistic Freudian slip. That this guy expressed, without knowing it, something of the situation, the horror that lay behind the perfect picture that the state was trying to create, right? That behind all of this stuff about, oh, production is up, everything's great, everything's fantastic, of course there was a horrible reality. And somehow the censorship committee were completely right. This is diabolical. There's something about this poster that screams the horror that's being hidden. Now, it's well known Stalin actually had an atrophied left hand. He would always hide it when he was in public, either like in photographs, but within a coat or behind his arm. And so, in some respects, it's almost like this poster is saying, behind all the beauty and behind all the strength, there's this monstrosity hiding, right? And anyway, the poster was never produced. In the same way, we are like this propaganda poster, right? We have the image of ourselves that we present, the person that we think we are, that we want to, project out so that other people think we're that. But the more we project out an image that things are good and fine and great and everything's working as planned, the more there will be some little feature of our lives that speaks otherwise. And sometimes that can be the truth. That's why in therapy, again, they don't listen to all. You come in and you talk for an hour about what you did all week. The therapist is bored, thinking about eating dinner next and what they're going to do after you're gone. But then there's a moment where you make a slip, where you say the wrong person's name, where you hesitate. Then they become interested. Because that's the truth. That's not all that other boring stuff about what happened in your week. Oh, the truth is in that little slip that you made. Let's explore that. I mean, an example is a friend of mine who was going through a difficult separation. He would go around and see his family and his kids every Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night he would go around, read them a story, put them to bed. So one week he's really stressed, work's going really difficult. He completely forgets to go see the kids. Right? It's really bad. His ex is kind of frustrated, obviously, because the kids are wanting to see him. He feels really bad. It's like, I feel so bad, I can't believe I did this. Fair enough. Then he does it a second week. And then he does it a third week. Now, at that point, his ex says, do you want your kids to hate you? Is that why? What are you doing this for? Do you want them to grow up despising you? And in a rare kind of moment of quiet, he reflected on that and said, maybe I do. Maybe I do want them to hate me. And what he was thinking is it's the very thing that he thought was a mistake. Oh, it's just forgetfulness. I just forgot. Well, he doesn't forget to meet me. He loves his kids a lot more than me. He doesn't forget things about work. He would forget 3 weeks in a row about his kids, who he loves more than anybody else. There's something else going on. And then you talk to him and you realize that he's full of self-hatred. He's full of self-loathing. He's full of guilt. And in some strange way, because he hasn't been able to face that, somehow it's coming out in his forgetfulness. If every time you're going to visit your sister, you can't find your keys, right? If it's only once, that's fine. But if it happens a few times, you've got to start wondering, do I not want to see my sister, right? That's where, in a sense, the truth speaks in the little thing that you would otherwise not look at, right? The symptom comes out in what's called defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms, there's a whole pile of them, but one example would be if there's a woman at work and her boss keeps shouting at her, right? But she can't shout back, otherwise she'll get fired. So she holds it in and she comes back and she shouts at her partner, right? That's called displacement. That's where you take anger that should be directed one place and you direct it somewhere else, right? Because it goes in, it has to go somewhere, it goes out. That's completely fine. That's not a wrong defense mechanism. In fact, that's part of relationships. All relationships are abusive, right? There's good abuse and bad abuse, basically. It's like, and I see on like these dating sites, not that I would know personally, right? But people say, I don't want to take any. They'll say bullshit. I don't want to take any bullshit. I won't take that. But as we all know, there's a certain amount of having to take people's crap. as part of a loving relationship, like in that example. Or a friend of mine was looking after her dying mother, who was living with them. And she also has 4 kids, and she was stressed. And so at times she was shouting at her partner, right? But he understood. He's like, yeah, that's part of this relationship. It's like, my goodness, look at the stress she's under. And I need to take that on. Now, there comes a point where that person says, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be shouting at you, I'm really angry about this. And if that doesn't happen, then the relationship becomes abusive in a destructive way, and it will end, right? So defense mechanisms aren't good or bad, they happen, but if they continue, if you hold on to your defense mechanism and you're always shouting at your partner because you can't realize that you're unhappy in your work, eventually it will destroy the relationship, right? So defenses, another one is splitting. If you've broken up with somebody, people will paint the other person as an enemy, a devil, really bad, and them as an innocent victim, right? That's a defense called splitting. You create a black and white world to cover over your hurt, your pain, your suffering. A good friend doesn't just point it out, but neither do they affirm it. They might listen to you, talk about all of that, and then at a certain point, maybe days or weeks later, they go, you know what, I just think you're really in pain. I think this really hurt you. How are you feeling? And if that's done in a good way, the person can then get to a point of going, yeah, and you know what, I'm blaming her all the time, but actually, you know what, I'm responsible. Maybe more responsible than her. But it's only when you get to that place in that safe environment that you can begin to look at what's beneath. And if you don't, if you continue to split, again, you'll never be able to have a healthy relationship because you'll always be engaging in that defense mechanism. That's the symptom. So the truth of who you are isn't really, I don't look at what you say about yourself or anything like that. I look at the tapping of your finger. I look at the little outburst of anger or frustration, and that potentially tells me something about a repressed and hidden truth. These are your ghosts. Ghosts are the presence of an absence. They're the presence of something that is gone. So whenever you watch a ghost story, like a little girl who's kind of drowned or something like that, and now they're back and they're haunting a house, They're the presence of something gone. We are all haunted houses. We are all full of ghosts. The people that, you don't even think about maybe on a daily basis anymore, but if they walk through that door, your heart would stop. And that's your ghost. They're absent, but they're present somewhere in your life, doing work. And if you don't face your ghosts, they will be poltergeists in your life, smashing things, bouncing things around, making things problematic, making you maybe cold and bitter in your heart. That's what the ghosts do when we push them down. We push them down, we push them down. But we push them down because we want to create an image of ourselves, like the propaganda poster, that everything is good. And this is called the superego. You'll maybe wonder why I'm doing all of this individual psychological stuff, but I think hopefully it'll become clear somewhere. But the superego is that image of yourself that's everything's good, everything's fine, everything's hunky-dory, right? And that we all kind of have that to some extent. There's an old story philosopher Zizek tells about Jesus, right? Jesus, he was out playing golf, first time he'd ever played golf, and he was with some friends. So they went out and they were teeing up, and Jesus got all the best stuff, right? Like all the best gear, best golf clubs, the works. But he was terrible, right? And he tees up, the ball falls off, he puts it back on, it's all whatever. And he's about to hit it, and one of his friends is like, that's the wrong club. And you're doing it all wrong, you're swinging all wrong, and Jesus is like, back off, you know who I am, here, come back off, right? I can do this. And then hits it. Of course, completely slices it, and the ball goes into this pond, and Jesus is like, oh, right. So Jesus goes out, walks on the water, goes in, picks up the ball, brings it back, re-tees it, tells everyone to back off, does it again, slices it, goes into the pond. So he goes out, walks on the water, and he's picking it up. Somebody else is walking past at this point, a stranger, and says, who does that guy think he is? Jesus Christ. And one of his friends says, no, he says, that is Jesus Christ. He thinks he's Tiger Woods, right? Now, yeah. Yeah, I know. It shows you, the idea being even Jesus has an alter ego of who he'd like to be, Jesus thinking he's Tiger Woods. So that's the kind of the superego, this ideal image of ourselves. But the really weird thing is, the ideal image of ourselves is often us. There was something I saw on Twitter recently that said about Kanye West, a musician, said, I wish someone looked at me the way Kanye West looks at Kanye West. Right? Which is, of course, that's narcissism, that you're in love with your own image of yourself. And I don't know if Kanye West really suffers from that, but you could imagine, that Kanye West, when he's on stage in front of tens of thousands of people, feels like Kanye West, like this person who's loaded and has everything and is fulfilled and all of that. And momentarily maybe believes that he is his own kind of ideal image of himself. But he's not. He's just like all the rest of us, dealing with getting old, dealing with broken relationships, dealing with anxiety, all of that stuff. You see this insight more in Oprah, when Oprah recently said, sometimes I need to take the advice of Oprah, right? What? Because she's saying, well, yeah, people think, or I think that I'm this person who can give you this best life, and I have this and that and whatever, but, Oprah's still sitting in her room on a given night watching daytime TV and thinking about the people she loves and has lost, There's nothing, this fame doesn't save you from that. Your own alter ego of yourself, but sometimes we grab hold of it, that heavenly perfect image. But then something else, as I say, will always speak out. Now, very quickly, I then want to move on and say, it's not just individuals who have ghosts. Families have ghosts. Relationships have ghosts. You have two people who are married and they think that the marriage is going to be wonderful, right? That youthful kind of fantasy that marriage is this great thing, right? When we all know marriage is horrible, relationships are terrible, they just might be slightly better than the alternative. It's like what Winston Churchill said about democracy. Democracy is terrible. Just compare it with everything else, it's kind of comes out a bit better, right? But when you don't realize that and you go, oh, this relationship will be perfect and this is great, and you try to hold on to that, often the difficult stuff you have to push down and push down and push down. And everybody knows, the two people know there's bitterness or anger or resentment or affairs going on, but as long as nobody talks about it, we can all carry on business as usual. As long as we just keep all that stuff hidden, then it won't come to the surface. But those things always happen. And the idea is, why would we bring it to the surface? If we did, there'd be a crisis. If we brought all that up, it would be nightmare. But the truth is, the relationship wouldn't become a crisis relationship. The relationship already is in crisis, just nobody's acknowledging it. And it comes out in how the kids do in school. It comes out in overwork. It comes out in spending too much time on the computer or whatever. But often, the family will invest loads into keeping the image of perfection. If any of you are on Facebook, you'll know this phenomenon. If you see one or two pictures of some happy couple, it's like, brilliant, they're happy. But if you see images after images after images of happy people, it's like, oh my goodness, they must be very unhappy, right? Which is denial. Denial is the idea where you put up the opposite of what you are. And alcoholism, of course, is the prime example where the alcoholic says, I'm not an alcoholic, which is a problem if you're not an alcoholic. When someone says, are you an alcoholic? And you say, no, I'm not. And you go, that's what an alcoholic would say. Yeah, but I'm definitely not. Well, that's definitely what an alcoholic would say, right? But the difference between denial and not saying something is not that you say, I'm not an alcoholic. If someone's an alcoholic, they're more likely to tell you they're not an alcoholic even when you don't ask. I'm just going to go down the road and get some more alcohol. There's not much here. I'm not an alcoholic or anything. Why are you telling me you're not an alcoholic? I never asked. I never thought you were, right? Denial is when the person has to keep saying it, even when nobody's asking or wondering. So when someone continually is saying, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, often that can be a hint that they're deeply unhappy. Right? That weakness hides in strength, right? And then partly what you have to do is help the couple kind of look at the stuff. And it's there. I know people, you'll know this, but in America, in the US, I know people who One friend of mine, for example, who, when her parents come round, she hides all the alcohol in her house, right? Everything, all the spirits, all the wine. Right? So naively I ask, why do your parents not know you drink? And she's like, oh, no, they told me to do it. I'm going, okay, so what you're saying is you hide all the alcohol so you can all pretend that you don't drink, so that you can all do business as usual, like family relations. Going, yeah. And she said it was really a nightmare because one time I forgot to hide some of the wine, which is like a Freudian slip maybe, and all hell broke loose. But think about it. It's not because the parents were confronted with something they didn't know. They were confronted with something they knew, but they didn't want to know that they knew, right? And I know people who, they're not religious, they don't go to church except when they go back to visit their parents. And again, I ask, is it your parents not know that you don't go to church? Oh yeah, they do, they're on Facebook and all of that. So literally you're going like emperor's new clothes. You're pretending, keep the farce going. Yes, because otherwise there'd be a crisis. But the truth is, there already is a crisis. And the only thing you can do, which is healthy, I think, is bring that stuff that's not spoken to the surface. And one of two things will happen. Either the family will break down, and then you'll just see what already was there. Or the family will go, oh my goodness, we're going to have to engage in a different way. We're going to have to find a new way through this. But you can't keep things the same. Same in the family relationship. Two people together, with secret bitterness and anger and resentment and emotional affairs or physical affairs going on that everybody knows but nobody talks about. You bring that to the surface, they'll either go, right, we can't be together, and they'll break, or they'll say, right, we need to change how we interact in some way. But the relationship can't continue. But often people do continue for 20, 30 years in those types of relationships. They're already dead, those relationships. They're already terrible and destructive. And bringing the stuff to the surface is what can kind of create the potential for change. Political groups also have ghosts. Political organizations. Like if you look at what's happening in Ferguson, where say something is unspoken, racism is there, but nobody talks about it. It's all beneath the surface, but it's just there, right? Then it explodes in these little moments of violence, right? And they speak the truth of what's really going on. What cannot be spoken finds ways to speak. There's a group called comedians called Mitchell and Webb, British comedians. They're very funny, but they have sketch shows. And one of their sketches, they have a guy who's like Dr. Evil. He's a like the James Bond supervillain Blofeld in the old James Bond movies. And in one of the sketches, this guy is there stroking his cat in this evil room, with like a world domination chart on the wall. And two henchmen come into the room, and a conversation ensues. And this is what they say. If I can find it. Oh. We can cut this bit out, it's fine. For the people who pay $20, they'll never know that it took me a while to find this. Talk among yourselves. I can do balloon animals while I'm waiting. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So this first henchman comes in to Dr. Evil and says, I'm afraid, sir, we still have a problem with Detective Harrison. Yes, Mr. Harrison has an irritating habit of disrupting our arrangements. Would you like me to have him removed? Yes, perhaps. Perhaps it would be better if Detective Harrison were taken out of the picture. Now, at this point, the second henchman speaks. Sorry, guys, you're doing it again. What, Alan? Have him removed, taken out of the picture. I thought we agreed at the meeting that these terms are needlessly ambiguous. We all agreed that from now on, when we want someone murdered, i.e. deliberately killed to death, then that's what we're going to say. Look, everyone knows what he means. Well, on this occasion, perhaps. I mean, that was an order to kill Detective Harrison, wasn't it? He has become a nuisance. Right, but a nuisance we should murder, is that it? I mean, my nephew's a nuisance. You see what I'm saying? Yes, all right. Okay, would you say it, please? Okay, deal with the Harrison situation. You see, that's no good. Oh, that was perfectly clear. What are you talking about, Keith? This is going to be, let's hope Professor Ritson meets with a little accident all over again. We waited 6 months for Professor Ritson to meet with a little accident until Leslie here told us that it was an accident we were supposed to make happen, right? Now, what you see in this thing is that none of them can say murder. None of them can actually speak the truth of what they're doing. It has to remain underneath. It has to remain hidden. Right? Think about it. Enhanced interrogation. Think about the ways internment in Northern Ireland, which is the arrest of people without trial. You can't say torture. No, it's not torture. Enhanced interrogation. What cannot be spoken? Political organizations. The more a political group says we've got it all right, we're good, we're the light on the hill, the more they push things down that can't be seen. And the one that brings it to light, which is the prophetic move, bringing the stuff to light, you've got to get rid of them, right? Think about WikiLeaks and what happened there. The stuff that caused all the death threats and the problems for Assange wasn't the stuff that nobody knew, what one politician said to another. That was just for gossip magazines. The stuff that was really dangerous was the stuff that we all knew was happening, but nobody wanted to know that we knew. Black hole prisons, murder of innocents, imprisonment of people without trial. We all knew that was happening, right? But now it was being brought to light. And the system, any system, will try to have homeostasis, will push that stuff down, And of course, religious groups have their ghosts. So within evangelicalism, for example, you'll find that there's the acceptable thing of having belief. You believe certain things about God and about Jesus. You hold all of that. And then you have the unacceptable, which is you have doubts and you question that stuff, right? But interestingly, if any of you know the evangelical environment, and I was part of it for a while, is there's an acceptably unacceptable transgression. You're allowed to have all the doubts you want, just don't ever mention them, right? Behind closed doors, it's totally fine, right? Just don't bring them up. So that's the unspoken, the thing that you keep down. So I do a thing called the Omega Course, which is like the Alpha Course in reverse, exiting Christianity in 12 weeks. And we look at, it's kind of like the Alpha Course, but we show how there's multiple discussions and multiple viewpoints within Christianity, and it's part of a beautiful debate. We use some Living the Questions material to do it. And but I remember there was an elder there from an evangelical church who was in her 50s. She'd just come out of cancer treatment. She was in the worship team. As I say, she was on the eldership team. She worked in the Fair Trade Cafe where all the money was given to charity. And during this conversation about the resurrection, she said, I don't know if I believe in a literal resurrection at the moment. That was fine. And somebody else said, I think I do. And someone else said, I've never thought about it. I say the words, but I've actually never thought about it. So we had this discussion about it. But at the end, she came up to me and she was like, I've believed all my life in the literal resurrection. I just have my doubts at the moment. And she started to look as if she was anxious. And I was like, what's wrong? And she said, well, if I said that in my church, I'd be taken off the eldership team. I'd be off the worship team. They still let me do the unimportant stuff, like work in the Fair Trade Cafe where all the money's given to charity. Not an important thing like playing a guitar. But I said, I couldn't say that. But then, of course, the question I asked was, well, is it because the other people don't have those doubts and those questions within the eldership team? And she was like, well, no, I guess they do. They're like me and they're thoughtful people. And so the transgression is not that you have the doubts, it's mentioning them. You've all just got to keep it a secret and let the game continue as normal. So, yeah, that's the unacceptable. It's like the story from Belfast where when the British Army would come over during the Troubles, there was nothing to do. Some of them would be sent to these tiny towns in the middle of nowhere, right? One of them's a 5-mile town. There's nothing there but a dozen bars, right? And so this sergeant says, let me show you a trick you can play on the Irish, show you how dumb they are, right? So that night, they dress in their casual clothes, go down to the pub, and the sergeant looks around for the drunkest Irish guy in the bar. Now, it's hard, they all look pretty wasted. But he sees one guy, Seamus, holding up the bar. He's like, Right, Seamus is the one. So he says, Seamus, come here, come here. So Seamus comes over. He takes out this old, crumpled £5 note, dirty old £5 note, puts it on the table. Takes out a shiny £1 coin, puts it on the table. Says, Seamus, would you rather have this old, dirty note or this bright, shiny coin? And Seamus is like transfixed by the shiny coin, bites it in his one good tooth, and is like, I'll take the shiny coin. And so the soldiers find this hilarious, and they play this with some of the other people in the bar. Well, anyway, there's this person from America who's there, and she's looking at this going, what's going on? So after the soldiers leave, she says to the guys, do you not know that the £5 note's worth 5 times more than the £1 coin? And Seamus says, of course we do, love, but if we took the £5 note, they'd stop playing the game. Right? Now, we're not as dumb as we look. The idea, but that's how the church kind of works, the people at the front have all of their doubts. I know loads of these big evangelical leaders, they don't believe half of what they say, And I'm not talking about the mainliners, they don't believe anything, right? I'm talking about the evangelicals. And the worship teams are like brought in, sometimes hired, but they play the game, and then everybody in the audience, they play the game, and they say they believe, all playing this strange game that virtually nobody except for the very new believers actually believe in, right? But it still continues to function. If I had more time, I would talk more about that, but we can't. We've got to keep going. But so within the conservatism, belief often is the thing that holds an anxiety, that hides something underneath doubts and unknowing. I was on a radio show with this guy. He'd written 10 books on apologetics. He has a show 3 days a week on apologetics, right? So I'm on the show. I didn't know this until I was on the show. I should have prepped, but I was like, my goodness, this guy loves his apologetics. This guy eats and sleeps apologetics. And at a certain point, he goes, Pete, are you saying that it's good to doubt, to ask questions, to all of that? And I'm like, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that it happens. I'm not saying that you should doubt. I'm saying that you're full of doubt. I mean, you've written 10 books on apologetics. You have a radio show 3 days a week on apologetics. I'm not your psychoanalyst, but I think you've got serious doubts. I mean, like, that's serious work. I mean, like, if you're really confident in what you believe, you don't have to do all of that. So, it's there, and it's obvious. That's why kind of arguing fact by fact is the wrong way of doing it. The belief isn't there. Like, I was a creationist. When I was 17, and I would argue black and blue for creationism. I read all the creationists, and nobody could beat me in an argument. You get the best scientists, and not because I was good, just because I was like not listening, right? I had my 5 good arguments. Why is there not so little dust on the moon and whatever? Until somebody said to me, who I respected, I don't think it's that important. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, because it's rubbish, right? It was like, the whole edifice of the whole fortress of belief I'd made was collapsed by one person who I respect, who probably still was a creationist themselves, just going like, I just don't think it's that important. Because deep down, I knew that it was doing something else, and I had to then work out what was it doing. But mainliners don't get away with this, because in mainline situations, and you can go, I don't know if God exists. You're like, yeah, fine, You're like, I think Jesus is just a guy. Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, bring it on. Like, I think the devil's great. Yeah, it's fine. I'm wondering about moving the altar just 5 inches that way, over my dead body. You'll take that altar out of my cold, dead hands, right? So interestingly, what you find is sometimes the liturgical structure can itself be a defense against a hidden anxiety. So everything is fine unless, oh my goodness, but if you change the structure. Now, of course, you can legitimate reasons for not wanting to change the structure, but if it's really strong, something else is going on. Like the old stereotypical example of that elderly person at the back who's always going, we're not changing the carpet, we are not changing the carpet. Like, the carpet's threadbare, there's holes in it, we're not changing that carpet. Like, and you get frustrated and all of that. But then you've got to realize it's not about the carpet. It's about the fact that she doesn't see her kids, that her husband died, that she's scared because she knows she's not well. Right? It's not about the carpet. The carpet's the ruse. If we get caught up in thinking it's about the carpet, we totally miss it. It's like if I go round to your house and you're arguing with your partner about turning out the lights before you go to bed. If you have one argument, it's about the lights. If you have 10 arguments and you're going to tear your heads off for it, it's not about the lights. It's about something else. Something else is going on. And a lot of, I think, the work of a religious leader is locating the ghosts. What are the ghosts in the given community? What is the unspoken? What is the thing that like, if we talked about that, there'd be chaos. If we brought that up, there'd be a crisis. The place is already in crisis. And the only way out is bring that stuff to the surface. Not directly, indirectly. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about how we do this. So don't want to get into that right now. But you're going to say, so what has this got to do with Christianity? Well, I want to say a couple of things, and I want to be aware of time. I mean, you're free. Lock the doors. I was going to say you're free to leave, but you're not. Close them. Well, in one sense, first of all, you could see the prophets as simply people who bring up the ghosts, the disavowed, the things that everybody knows is going on but nobody mentions. The prophet is the one that says, you're into righteousness and justice and all that. No, you're not. Look what's going on. What's hidden in plain sight, like the three-finger gesture that none of us would probably notice until it's pointed out, and you realize, oh my goodness, it's hidden in plain sight. That's what detectives do. If you like Columbo, I love Columbo. Columbo, the detective comes in and they see something that's hidden in plain sight that tells the truth. The murderer has created a scene that makes everything look like something else. And the normal person, the police officer, looks at it and they believe what the criminal wants them to believe. But then Columbo comes in and goes, oh, I see that guy's a smoker. And it's weird because all the cigarettes in the bin, they've died naturally. He's let them just smoke to the end. But the cigarettes in the ashtray have been stumped out. This isn't the way he puts out his cigarette. Someone else was here. That little insignificant thing then is what opens up. And the interesting thing about Columbo is very different from other detective shows where you don't know who did it, and actually the detective doesn't know who did it until the end. In Columbo, we know from the very start who did it. And so does Columbo. Columbo knows who did it the very first time Columbo goes onto the scene. And all Columbo's doing is acting dumb until he can kind of get the criminal to kind of, catch the criminal. That's the idea, is like you look for the little detail that tells the truth. So the prophet, like Luther, wasn't trying to create a new church, wasn't trying to create the Protestant church. Luther was just trying to bring up the disavowed stuff in the Catholic Church, the indulgences being in the hands of the wealthy and the powerful. That Luther had no desire to create something new, bring up the old. Bonhoeffer was trying to bring up what was going on, the unsaid in the German church at the time. Wasn't trying to create the confessing church, was simply trying to bring up the stuff. Jesus potentially wasn't trying to start a new religion. What if Jesus was simply bringing up the disavowed ghosts in the community at the time in that place? Now, what's interesting is when you do that, new things happen. That's an epiphenomenon of whenever you bring up the ghosts, often they'll try and kill you. If you survive, and you're kind of successful, then often you will create a reformation in the community over time that you're questioning. And also, sometimes the people who are bored of the long wait, they start something new. All right? That's kind of this threefold thing that happens. But then the new thing, it's not great, we've got there now. No, it then has its own repressed stuff, its own ghosts. And again, the prophets have to come and do the same thing with that. And it's this strange ongoing process where you don't get to the point where you go, here we are, we made it. You get to the point where you have to go, right, this is an ongoing process of bringing stuff up to the surface. And in like relationships, you have to do that continually. And if you did it once 20 years ago, it doesn't mean you're doing it today. It's this ongoing process of going, can we look at our ghosts? Can we continue in this process of transformation? That's what health isn't whenever you've dealt with your ghosts, all your ghosts. Health is when you're willing to tarry with them on a regular basis, bringing them up, going through that ongoing process. That's why you can't, like for Aristotle, happiness wasn't something that you knew in any moment. You couldn't really say you were happy, when you were young. He was like, no, how do you know you're happy? For him, happiness was something you kind of got a glimpse of whether you're happy near the end of your life. In the same way, I think it's like you can't know if you've got a healthy relationship at the beginning. Whenever young people judge people who are older, going, that would never happen to us. No, you don't know. And often maybe it's only in the autumn of a relationship that you can go, did we on a constant, continual basis, renew and go through that process? And that's the problem with a lot of communities. We want to create new Edens, places without repression. Things are good. It's like that story of the guy who's on the desert island, on his own, shipwrecked, and somebody rescues him, realizes he's been on the island on his own for 20 years. And before he takes him off the island, says, "Where did you live?" So this guy takes him to this clearing with 3 buildings, and looks at the first building. He says, "What's that?" He says, "That's my house. I lived there. I built it 2 years in, and it's running water and all of that." He says, "What's the building beside it?" He says, "I'm a very religious man. That's my church." He says, "I pray there every Sunday, read my Bible every Wednesday there." And he's just about to walk away, and he goes, "What's the building beside that?" He says, "I don't want to talk about it. He goes, "Oh, come on, tell us. What is it?" He says, "That's a church I used to go to. Terrible place. Terrible place." But, that's what we want to do. We don't want to. He doesn't want to face the reality that the darkness is in him. He wants to externalize it onto them. That's splitting. Religious communities split. That's a defense. If you see you're in a religious community that creates goodies and baddies, like the baddies are there, and we're a fundamentalist defense mechanism. But we want to push the darkness out rather than somehow go, the darkness is here in the midst of us. How do we wrestle with that? Now, I want to kind of begin to draw to a close with how this might connect in a deeper way with Christianity. And I've got time to do it. Sorry, okay. Don't worry, you won't hear me ever again after this, so you'll get lots of me now. But we do have to 8:30 or 8:45. But we won't go to there. I promise. We can. And anybody who wants to go for a drink afterwards, I'm totally up for that. Let's go for a drink. You deserve it. You deserve it for all of this. But there's the prodigal son story is interesting. And the reason why I want to talk about the prodigal son is because when it comes to bringing up ghosts, we can be either jokers or tricksters. Jokers or a trickster. A joker is, in the medieval courts, the joker was the one who laughed at the king and the queen, right? Who made fun of the system. But interestingly, they were paid by the system. Right? They were part of the system. And a joker had a very difficult time because they were there to make fun of things. But if they did it too well, they, whatever. So they were protesting against the system that they were actually a part of. Now, you think of a joker in political terms. A joker protest is a type of protest where the government says, right, you can protest, right? You can turn up at 2 o'clock, protest till 4, pick up all the rubbish and don't hurt anybody, don't destroy anything, right? That's a protest that is endorsed by the very system that it's protesting against. Right? And the system actually thrives on that. You do that, system has no problems with it. A trickster is one who pushes against the very system. Out of actually love for the system generally, but pushes against it. So it's a protest where they say, you know what, we're actually going to stop the traffic. Oh yeah, you can protest, but don't do anything like that. Don't do anything noticeable. But protest in this park where there isn't anybody. No, we're going to protest here, right? We're going to actually disrupt things. That's a problematic protest. The joker is one who always attacks the symptom. So makes fun of the symptom, because we want to, when there's symptoms, maybe it's aggression or anger, you get frustrated with people, you have a short fuse. What you want is to kind of keep that under control, right? That's what you want. You don't want to look at why it's there. Oh my goodness, I have to look at this person who I loved and lost. I have to look at this difficult thing in my life. No, I don't want to do that. No. Just give me some techniques so that I can be a bit calmer. Do a little prayer and everything will be okay, right? I had somebody said that to me. He says, I suffer from jealousy a lot, but I say this little prayer and it really calms me down. I go, how long have you been doing it for? Oh, about 10 years. It's not working. You still have to use it, but you really is a point. If you work through why you're jealous, then you would have to do the prayer, right? But that's what we want. We point at the symptom and we think the symptom is the problem. No, the symptom isn't. The symptom is the solution to a problem. Right? The symptom exists because of a problem, and if you try to get rid of the symptom, another one will just appear. Alcoholism isn't a problem, it's the solution to a problem. Homelessness isn't a problem, it's the solution to a problem. So if you take homelessness and you have a joker kind of relationship with it, you want to obviously help the homeless and go and provide for them in some sort of way. There's nothing wrong with that. But then, in a sense, what we're doing is we're going, we have something to give the homeless. We are kind of like God for the poor, right? We go out there to help them because we are good news to them, right? But what if if there's systematic homelessness, right? What if that is a symptom of a crisis within our own society and structure? And that the homeless are actually the good news for us. They are our salvation. In that if we can work out why that exists, and which critiques us, not us as individuals necessarily, but us as a society, us as a community, then will cause us to have to change in a dramatic way that will actually create a systemic change with the homeless population. So the difference is, it's like that priest, I think it was Oscar Romero, might have been somebody else, but said, when I fish people out of the river, they call me a saint. When I ask who's throwing them in, they call me a communist, right? There's one is like, yeah, helping people's fine, but when you start to get this to the systemic issue, to what's behind the symptom, why does this exist? Like the prison system in the US is not a problem, it's the solution to a problem in a racist and a society with deep inequalities and deep financial inequalities. The prison system is the solution. It shows that there's a crisis within the system as a whole. And so with alcoholism, you've got to get to the point of what does this solve? And solve badly, but what is this doing? Work out that, and you can dissipate the symptom. Right? You can dissipate the symptom. So that's what the trickster is. So Christianity, very quickly, the prodigal son story, I'm going to do a rereading of this, and I'm going to give it a very alternative reading that probably none of you have ever heard before. And it's thanks to my friend Kester Bruin, who came up with it. I'm not saying it's right, but I think it's right. No, it's not. Parables have multiple meanings. It's wonderful. They can contain multiple meanings. What I want to do is simply say, right, here's a story about this kid goes off, everything goes wrong, comes back, and everyone thinks it's a beautiful story about how God welcomes back those who are sinners and how there's never anything we've done that's too bad that we can't come back. We all know that reading. We all know Henri Nouwen. We all know the Rembrandt painting. We all know that. But Kester, in his book Mutiny, about pirates and Christianity, he says, well, let's look at it from the point of view of the son. Okay, this son is growing up in a house that has not known poverty, that has not known need, that has not known hunger, right? And by the way, in those days, a family like that, my goodness, the disparity is huge. You've got slaves, you've got servants, you've got livestock, you've got all of that, and people outside will be starving, right? With that amount of wealth. And this young guy's like, I'm bored. Life is boring. This is terrible. I want to go out and explore the world. I want to see what I'm missing, right? And so, he goes up to his dad and says, Dad, I want my share of the inheritance. I'm going to go out and explore the world, right? Basically, goes to university, right? Takes the parents' money and goes out and gets drunk, right? So he takes the money. I'm sure his dad was a bit unhappy, whatever, but he goes out, and it says he experiences a world of need. It says I think it was a famine. Anyway, he loses everything, and he's sitting down and working, feeding livestock. And it says that he thinks to himself, you know what, I'm going to go back to my father's home. But he says this, he says, I won't go back as a son, I'll go back as a laborer. I'll make an honest day's money for an honest day's labor. Right? So he starts to make his way back. Now, the father hasn't been out looking for him, which is interesting because it's not like the other parables where the woman's looking for the penny or the shepherd's looking for the sheep. This father has not left the safe confines of home. But he does hear from a servant that his son's coming back. So he gets up and he runs out. And of course, like any conservative father, he's like, oh, what has that guy learnt out there in those liberal universities, right? What have they taught him, right? What's going on? Because he's going to come back with some crazy ideas. So he goes out, he sees him. And he says, don't say anything, right? Son's about to give his speech. Don't say anything, don't say anything. Try this on this coat. Oh, it's lovely, feels good, isn't it? You must be freezing. Try on this ring, this symbol of power. Look at the power you've got, you're my son. And hey, got a fattened calf for you, you must be starving. And the son goes, yeah, okay. And so he goes back in, and the older son is like, really angry. So I didn't have a choice. I'm the older son. You had a chance for both of us to go out there and change things, come back and make a difference. You were alive. Now you're dead. Now, that's a really interesting reading of the prodigal. Now, why would Kester want to read the prodigal in this way? Well, first of all, he says, well, I want to read it as a tragedy because nothing changes. It's a story where nothing, at the beginning and the end is pretty much the same. And in good storytelling, that's generally not what happens. Some fundamental change happen. But also, he says, he compares it to other stories of fathers and sons and daughters and fathers, like Star Wars. Because Star Wars is exactly the same as the prodigal. There's a point where Luke Skywalker realizes his dad is, this powerful Darth Vader. And Darth Vader offers the same promise. Come back, be with me, we can rule the universe together. Right? But Luke does the rebel move and says no, and ends up being the kind of salvation of his father in Return of the Jedi. Peter Pan is the same. This young girl who's on the eve of becoming a woman, but her parents go out and leave her. Peter Pan comes and takes her away, says, you never need to grow old. But she's in this land where she becomes a type of mother to the Lost Boys. And time re-enters the narrative through a pirate who's being chased by a crocodile that's ticking. And interestingly, Kester points out that in the original play, the same person that played the father played the pirate. And so when Wendy, having to overcome the pirate, becomes this metaphor for overcoming the father, when she's done that, she is able to return to become a woman. You see that as well, in terms of in families, there's a conservative thing where often it's like kids should obey their parents. And you have these pictures in the US of these for Christian radio with these non-antagonistic happy families. You're like, well, where does that exist, right? These young kids who are all smiling and being, and I've listened to Christian radio, and they can offer things. Or is your kid being disobedient? You can listen to these courses and get everything back. And that's terrible because the kid will repress and then be killing cats when they're older. But then the liberal view is sometimes worse. The liberal view is, well, I will be a container for my children's anger and antagonism. I'll be a nice, good parent, and whenever they act out, I will be generous and kind. And that's awful. How do you write music about that? Right? How do you write poetry about your mum being really kind? Right? There's this differentiation, but interestingly, the most interesting thing about, I think, probably having kids is the point whenever they become the instrument of your conversion. They come back from university with crazy ideas, and then they get you to rethink your political views, your religious views. But, that was fascinating. But the main reason why I think this reading is interesting is you can compare it with another story in the Bible of a family of three who know poverty, who don't know hunger, who don't know what it is to have an empty stomach, where the son leaves and finds himself very quickly surrounded like the prodigal around animals, who also experiences the horror of life and also has an opportunity to return. And so you're reading this story and you're going, right, okay, Luke's told this story. What about this story? What's going to happen? Is he going to go back? And just in this other story as well, the father isn't out looking for the son, but the father will send his servants and get him, bring him back to the place of enclosed wealth. But now something different happens. So this son goes, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? What's going on? And then the barrier that separates the wealthy enclosure and the rest of the dirty, suffering world rips apart. And the father has to enter the world, into the dirt of the immanent world, where real people, where two or three are gathered together, where the people who are thirsty get water, and the people who are hungry get food, and the people who are naked get clothes. God has to come into the world. It's like, I don't want into heaven. You got 5 minutes to get out. That, I think, is the radical core of Christianity, is this crazy idea that, no, we're not trying to escape to some heavenly place. whether whoever, and by the way, I live in LA, the most religious place in the world. You know, it's like everyone's promising certainty and satisfaction. Oh, take ayahuasca, it's the new drug, you know. You'll have oneness with the divine and all of this. I know friends who are the Burning Man community, and they're great, but they all talk like they're like senseis or rabbis, or, you know, and new technologies and new spiritual practices. Everything's promising this. You know, you need never die. You know, very soon you'll be able to download yourself in the digital form, be up in the cloud, travel faster than angels, you know everything. These are not the promises in church anymore, thank goodness. They're the promises of the new technologies, right? This religious desire to give you heaven. I think the radical truth of Christianity is, no, we get God out into the world. That the truth, the absolute, the divine is in the midst of the brokenness, the midst of our lives, the midst of this community together. That's where we find truth. I will finish with one story that captures this, and then we maybe, if we have time, a few questions, a blessing, and that's that. But and by the way, there's a beautiful Islamic parable of a woman who carries fire and water everywhere she goes. Why? Because the water is to extinguish hell, and the fire is to burn up heaven, so that we can learn to live on the earth. For no other reason. Why? Because she says, we don't live well out of fear of hell or out of reward in heaven. We learn to live and to be and to find the absolute in the midst. In this Buddhist parable, it talks of a woman who gives birth to a beautiful baby girl. But after only a few days of life, the girl dies, and she is distraught. She wraps the child's body in linen. She wraps that body to her own, and she goes out in search of anyone who can resuscitate her child. She goes to faith healers and witch doctors and elders, and nobody can help. But one of the village elders says, high up in the mountains, away from everyone, it's said that there's a holy man who's so close to the divine, he can even raise the dead. Now, perhaps it's a myth, or maybe he's long since dead. But that's the only thing I can offer you. If you're that desperate, go in search of him. And so she does. She gets a few provisions. She goes up into the mountains, and eventually she finds this little hut beside this crystal clear lake, and it's the only dwelling she's come across. So she knocks on the door, and this elderly man comes out. She begins to weep. She says, I don't know if you're the one I'm looking for. I don't know if you're the one that the people talk about in the village. But my child is dead, and I must have her back. Well, the old man takes pity on her, and he says, well, I am the man you're looking for, and I can help. But I need to create a potion, and the potion requires ingredients. And one of the ingredients is a handful of mustard seeds, taken from a home that has not been touched by that black sun of suffering that has scorched your life. So go, bring me back the mustard seeds, I'll make the potion. And so she does. She goes back into the village, and she goes from house to house, but she can't find any home that hasn't been touched by darkness and by death and by suffering. And yet something miraculous happens. As she hears the stories of other people's suffering, and as she is gradually able to tell her own story, eventually she is able to bury her child in the earth. She wanted heaven. She wanted a heavenly answer. She wanted her child back. Just make the pain go away. She didn't want to do that difficult work. Why would she? And the old man didn't say, I can't bring your child back, but neither did he say, yeah, I can. The old man created a space where she could listen to other people's stories and share her own. And as those ghosts came to the surface, she was able to find healing. Now, that's not great news. Go like, I want the good news that life is great and we all know the answers. No, the good news is better. We don't know the answers and life's a bit crap. That's good news. If we can accept it, we can find a deeper joy in the midst of brokenness, not in the running from it. And as she was able to bring her ghost to the surface, she was able to learn to live again. You shall know your ghosts, and your ghosts shall set you free. That's your truth. Okay, do we have any time for a couple of questions? I'm looking for the leader of the show. What do you think?
We certainly have time for questions, and there will be a microphone at the back by the large window and in the balcony, and there's 2 microphones here. So as we did before, would you like to take a moment just to stand and quietly reflect on what we've heard this evening from Peter? Please be seated. And again, we invite those who have questions to ask that one sentence that has a question mark at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And we were looking forward to Peter's responses. So we have one already right here, do we? Yeah, sure. We're ready. And others are welcome to come and line up.
So thank you so much. I don't know if I can do this in one line, but I'll try. You talked about us speaking our truth and how painful that can be, and the courage that it takes. Mm-hmm. And what I'm really worried about right now, and I want you to help me with, is we have a government here that is trying to make us very afraid. The bad guys are coming to get us, and they might even cut our heads off. Yep. So we have to be very afraid, and the government's going to keep us safe, though. And we just have to burr it down and let them do it. But it's a load of crap. I mean, it's not, they're not going to come and get us, and they aren't terrorists. They're just people that have maybe gone astray a bit. So why can't we speak up and say, you're crazy, that's a load of crap? Mm. But we don't. We bury down and we let them tell us this. And they we let them convince us that they know and we don't, and we should trust that crap. Yeah. So I want to know what we need to do to be courageous enough to stand up and say no. And today we had headlines in the paper. Our Prime Minister said, if they kill us, we will kill them. Now, what kind of craziness is that?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And that, I mean, one of the, when I say defense mechanisms, the first thing you have to do with the defense mechanism is, understand that we all have them. That's part of life. And that they're there for a reason. We couldn't function. We wouldn't be here tonight. Because if you turned to each other and told your stories, oh my goodness, the stuff that we would hear. And you'd amaze, how do we even get here and listen to this and do this when there's so much going on? But that's partly because of our defense mechanisms. But there are defense mechanisms that are better and that are worse. One of the ones that is worse, and by the way, if you want to know vaguely which is which, it's kind of the ones that kids use are usually the rubbish ones, because they're the most crude. And as you get older, hopefully you get better ones. And we can talk about that a little bit maybe if you want. But one of the early defense mechanisms, and one of the crudest and most destructive, is splitting. And I mentioned that briefly. Splitting is you create good and bad. And when you're a kid, you create monsters under the bed. They're the baddies. And then when you get older, you realize the monsters are in you. They're not under your bed. They're inside you. But children have to, in a sense, do that externalizing. And so you see kids have that. And in environments politically, when you see anxiety and fears, splitting is one of these most problematic defense mechanisms that you see. Now, 2 things I just want to mention very briefly is, one is, the thing you should know about defenses is that directly attacking them often does the opposite. If I see you being nasty to your friend, for example, and I go, look how you're treating your friend, you're terrible, right? You're likely to go, hey, hold on a second, you don't know what she's like, she's a nightmare, right? She deserves it, right? Because even if you know that I'm right, you won't admit it. You'll be like, back off. But if I go, let's go out for coffee, and over coffee I go like, you're really stressed, what's going on? You're more likely to say, yeah, and oh my goodness, I really took it out on my friend. right? That's Kierkegaard calls that indirect communication. That if you want to really address something, mostly indirect communication is best. Sometimes you have to directly do things. Sometimes it requires direct communication, but mostly indirect communication is more productive. If direct communication worked, therapists would shout at you, you're terrible, but they don't, because it doesn't really work. So suffice to say, obviously in a community, if you're looking at your defenses in a community and you're the pastor, you find indirect ways of bringing them out. That's why comedians are so good, because comedians, they laugh at themselves and their own ridiculousness, and then you see it in yourself, and you laugh at it, stuff that you maybe couldn't admit usually. Singer-songwriters, they again sing stuff that helps you connect. Parables, stories, that's what we use. On a political level, it's difficult because it's massive. We're impotent in some respects. But in the same way, I think there are strategies that are more effective and less effective to engage with splitting, which I think you're talking about. One of them, for example, is I see a lot of people who, whenever the Paris shootings happened, they were putting up Islamic critiques from Muslims. They were putting up stuff like adverts that were from Egypt, our cartoons that were drawn that were kind of about free speech, that kind of thing. Little things like that weren't kind of like, attacking people, because it's natural. That's the one thing, you've got to be sympathetic. Like in some respects, some people are frightened, and it's fear that creates the splitting. And so sometimes, now, I'm not sympathetic to the people who propagate it. That's different. The people who propagate it are much more responsible. But the people who fall for it are often afraid, they're anxious. And so we need to find ways of helping them see that the other isn't that other. We have a group called the Evangelism Project in Belfast, and where we go to be evangelized by other communities. So we go to the Islamic community or whatever to be evangelized. But part of the evangelism isn't them saying you should become Islamic or whatever. It's when we say, what do we look like to you? And then we see what we look like from the perspective of the other, and we realize how rubbish we are and how our community is broken. And that's a strategy to indirectly help people, not other the other. So I'm sure there's loads of I bet you any money, there's people, I'm sure probably yourself actually, but there's people in this room who are probably doing projects that are trying to break down that tendency to split. And anything like that I think is good. But directly assaulting it is often, like if I meet someone or a group or a church and they're really scared of those crazy Muslims who are coming to destroy us, and I get up and I directly, attack that, it doesn't do any good. But if, I find a way of bringing someone who's from the Islamic community to maybe speak a little about what it's like to be, Muslim in the US or something like that. I find indirect ways, or I use the biblical text, and I use some stuff about the exile, and I find ways of connecting the text. Sorry for taking so much time on that. I think it's a good question, but these are indirect communication strategies, are useful. I wish I could say more. Sorry.
Hi, there's another question over here. I would mention, too, those watching live stream also can let us know their questions.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
My question for you is simply this. Is it possible for a community to see and wrestle with its ghost without a trickster?
Without being a trickster?
Without one, messianic trickster to come and say, hello, here's what's going on.
Yeah.
That's my question.
I mean, my broad answer to that, and again, this would be good to have a discussion about, but is that you strangely need often a structure that you think, you imagine can help you, that helps, but then ultimately dies. And the example I want to use is, well, therapy is a good example. You go to a therapist because you think that they're going to analyze you, they're going to help you. And actually, that's okay to think that. And the analyst allows you to think that, mostly for a while. But gradually over time, you realize that the analyst can't help you. That, they can't bring that person back. They can't make everything better. But that you're having to do the work. And that in a sense, because they call the person the analyzand, because they're the ones doing the work. And gradually you learn that they're just like you, and you break up with your analyst. It's kind of the last act of psychoanalysis. You break up with the analyst, right? And you learn to live. And I think there's something similar within a church environment. People often come into a church, or the stuff that I do, which are church-like or whatever, they'll maybe come because they think I've got the answer. They come because they're hurting, because they're broken, because something isn't working. And I contain that for a while, without necessarily saying, without saying I can be the Savior, but without also just bursting the bubble, containing that. And then through rituals and through time, they get to the point where they're able to look at their own lives and priesthood of all believers. And then kind of my job is over. There's a documentary I would recommend you watch called Kumari. I don't know if anyone's seen it. But it's about a guy who pretends to be a guru. And he sets up a religion in Arizona. And about a dozen people start following him. And at first it's kind of him just showing how all these gurus are just in it for the money, and it's easy to start a religion. And you're laughing at the people. They're all silly, you know. There's this guy, he goes around getting free samples in all these different supermarkets. That's all he does all day, right? Then over time, you stop laughing at them and you realize that these are really human beings. And that guy's doing that because that's his only connection with real human beings in his day. And then I see myself in that. I go to coffee shops. Often I think the reality of the reason why I go to coffee shops is because I want that little 5-minute interaction with the person behind the counter, because maybe I'm lonely or I'm traveling a lot. And I realize I see that. And Kumari starts to feel guilty because he dresses up in like a guru, he grows a big beard, he has a massive staff, but he has these stupid rituals that are like air guitar rituals. And there's this point where he's going to tell everybody that he's just a fake, and he bottles it, he can't do it. But then at the very end he does, but he does it in a different attitude. He comes out and he says, just dressed in his normal clothes, no beard, no fake accent, no big staff, and says, I'm really sorry. He says, I'm not who you think I am. And you know what? All of you, you did the work yourselves, because these were broken people who began to get their lives together because they were part of that group. So the last act of this 3-part documentary is where they realize that the guru is not a guru, and that they did it together. And ironically, that's probably the very point where he was the most guru, like the very point where he said, I'm no guru, I'm just like you. At the key moment was the moment when he probably did what I think is the most guru-like thing you can do. So that's just the interesting thing I want to say is it's often it takes a kind of catalyst, but it's not some special superhuman person. It's almost a fiction that you gradually expose, if that makes any sense. But please ask a question. I could have talked forever.
I really enjoyed your presentation. I've always felt that kind of the shadow analysis of the church is really what's missing. But the way you present it reminded me, I just saw the documentary about Edward Snowden, the whistleblower of all whistleblowers. And I went 2 nights in a row and the impact was very powerful. So I'm trying to put that together, like what he revealed and what he did. And it had something to do with getting people to not be bullied. And I'm also, in my own head, trying to put it together in some creative way with what happened in Paris, the assassinations. So I just want to throw those 2 events out to you. And in terms of your style of analysis, do you have a reflection or 2?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I actually haven't seen the Edward Snowden film yet, but I've heard it's brilliant. I've heard it's amazing. But I think that's a perfect analogy for this. Because what did Snowden do? In the US, he didn't tell people what they didn't know. He told everybody what was known, but nobody wanted to know. And that was what was devastating. And we're all like this, right? We all have like a false narrative. I say, like, I love animals, but I don't. I eat them, right? And and like, I do. I eat them, and you know what? I know that the way they're treated before I eat them is probably horrific, right? But I don't want to know that because I have a false image of myself as a nice guy who likes animals, right? So the last thing I want to do, if I see like animal rights people, I want to avoid them, not because I don't know what they're going to say, because I know that they're actually already what they're going to say, and they're going to show me pictures that I already kind of know, but I don't want to know that I know. And so the radical move, the difficult move, is coming to admit to what you know. That's a really difficult thing to do. And by the way, in evangelical churches, you'll see this sometimes as a minister, if they say, I have my doubts, I have my questions, they'll often get fired. Not because people didn't know that. Everybody knows that, right? It's because they didn't want to know that they knew it. Because when they're confronted with that, they're confronted with their own anxiety, their own brokenness. So they get someone else in who'll play the game, right? But for me, this is one of the things about the church and politics and all of that is, how do we create spaces where we can come to know what we already know? Like if I say to someone, your wife's having an affair, and they kick me out of the house, I never want to see you again. It's like, oh, right, you already know. Otherwise, why would you be so angry? I mean, you'd be confused. You'd be like, what? You'd sit down, you'd be shocked. But the outburst of anger leads me to suspect that you kind of already suspect this, but you just don't want to face it because of the crisis it would be. So part of this, and this is my problem with a lot of prayer, by the way, is that a lot of prayer is, I pray, God, for the Sudan, and I pray for what's going on in Iraq, and I care about this or that. Like, no, I don't. I don't care, right? I want to be the type of person who pretends that I care. Like, some people do care, right? I don't, but I would like to pretend I did. But actually, the better prayer for me is, God, I don't care. That's a really more difficult prayer. It's like, God, I pray for my neighbor. I really like them. No, they never give me back my lawnmower. I pray that you would put pestilence on my neighbor, right? and there's like prayers in the Hebrew Scriptures that I pray that the kids of my enemies will be dashed against rocks. You go like, how could you pray that? That's a crazy prayer. You never hear that in church, right? But the idea is that, first of all, what people say is often not what people say they mean is often not what they mean, right? I want you to leave generally doesn't mean I want you to leave. It generally means I want you to fight to stay. But you can't say that, Or if I've just broken up with someone and I'm shouting about them and I'm saying how bad a person they are, if my friend says, no, don't say that, say nice things, I could turn around and go, hold on, let me get all of this out so that I can come to know what I know, because deep down I know that it's not all their fault. Deep down I know that I'm partially responsible. I know that. Let me get all this stuff out, so that I can confront, oh my goodness, my anger and frustration and all of that stuff. And then as the first, I can start to do something about it. And that's what happens in AA. The first thing you do is you admit, my name is Pete and I'm an alcoholic, right? The story that you lie about, I'm not an alcoholic. I could give up any time I want. That's the false narrative the alcoholic tells. Is then replaced with, right, I'm going to be honest about who I am. That's an honest prayer. That's a full prayer, F-U-L-L, not F-O-O-L, Irish accent. But I think empty speech, in psychoanalysis, empty speech is speech that doesn't capture your inner moans and groans, right? Empty speech is what kind of is your image of yourself that you'd like to present. Full speech is what connects with the inner truth of your moans and groans and being, and somehow you articulate that in a way that can often be very shocking to yourself. I think you could also talk about empty prayer and full prayer. Now, what would full prayer be is that somehow you create a space where people can bring up that stuff. So what I was trying to do tonight is show how individuals, political systems, religious systems, that they're all kind of work in a similar way. And what someone like Snowden is doing was confronting us with what we know what they want to know. And one example is belief in Santa Claus. A kid believes in Santa Claus, a parent doesn't. But a parent gets the joy of the belief through the belief of the child. So they don't have to believe it. They get the psychological pleasure of it. So the parent is traumatized whenever the kid stops believing. Often kids continue to believe in Santa Claus even when they don't really believe it, just because of the joy it gives the parents, right? You go like, oh my goodness, if I tell the parents that I don't believe in Santa Claus, it'll be devastating to them. I better keep this charade going. And in some respects, that's it, is that often, and this is my loving critique of progressive community, which is like my own community in many ways, is that sometimes I think intellectually we can embrace doubt, ambiguity, complexity, we can embrace those things, but sometimes we have a liturgical structure that is fundamentalist on our behalf. We sing songs about a God we don't really believe in. Not that type of God. Not the God who comes in as the Deus Ex Machina who fixes everything. We may believe in a different conception of God, but we often will do prayers, liturgy, preaching, songs that affirm the very God that if I asked you, you would go, oh yeah, I don't really believe in that. And then you start to worry that actually that's preventing a confrontation with something. And I think the church in its core, radical core, is about actually helping you confront that stuff, not helping you avoid a confrontation with it. Okay.
Yeah, just checking. Any questions? I'm having a little difficulty seeing in the balcony, but any questions in the balcony? Is there a question over there?
Okay. One last one. This better be a good one if this is going to be the last one, whoever's giving it.
Oh. Hey, I have a question. Your latest book.
Oh, yes.
We were hearing something reflected tonight, but can you tell us a little bit more about the book?
Very briefly,
what you explore?
I mean, another hour. No. Very briefly, the book's called The Divine Magician because I actually am trying to look at Christianity in a radically different way, not about belief, not about theism or atheism or any of that stuff, but as a way of being in the world. So that's what my project is. And one of the interesting things about a magic trick, as some of you will know, if I know a few magic tricks, I would almost do one, but is a classical vanishing act has 3 parts. It has a pledge, which is an object, like a coin or a bird, right? And then there is the turn, and that's the disappearance of the bird. And then there is the prestige, and the prestige is the return of the bird, right? Now, the truth is, what you get back is not what you lost, right? If I make a coin disappear and I make it reappear, that's a different coin that I hid there, right? That first coin's down the back of my neck, right? Same with the bird. You get that beautiful dove that the magician gets to return. That's a different dove. That first dove's dead. It broke its neck and stuffed it up its sleeve, right? Yeah, so I'm sorry, magicians have a lot of dead birds, okay? Mountains of dead birds. You see this in the film The Prestige, and Zizek talks about this brilliantly. But what I argue is that Christianity is like a vanishing trick. And by the way, Tillotson, an old archbishop, he saw this because he was like, you know what? See when the magicians say hocus pocus? That sounds awfully like hoc est corpus, what the priests say at Mass, right? You know. And then someone else was like, oh, and they talk about the patter, you know, what the patter of the magician sounds a lot like Paternoster, what the repetitive prayers of the monks. And Tillotson thought this was a really bad thing, but my book is the premise that actually Tillotson was onto something, and this isn't bad, it's good. The Eucharist and Christianity is a magic trick. So in the Eucharist, you've got 3 parts. You've got God, the divine, the sacred, right? There's the pledge. You've got the turn, the disappearance in the body, and you're waiting for the return, and you realize the prestige is us, the body and blood of Christ in the midst. And I use that to explore a very radical reading of Christianity, which says that actually, instead of people thinking Christianity is about us getting the sacred God, the absolute, this brilliant, perfect thing that will make everything great, that it's the opposite. That Christianity says, here is the sacred object that we think will make us whole and complete. Starts off with a piece of fruit and Genesis, whatever, but the disappearance, the turn behind a curtain. And then the third act of the trick is the ripping of the curtain. Or the second act is the ripping of the curtain, and the object's not there. Think of the curtain and the temple. And whoa, the turn, the Holy of Holies, there's nothing in there. Oh, this is terrifying. And then there's the prestige. The sacred is not an object. The sacred is a depth dimension in all objects. God is with us. I was thinking of finishing with a blessing. Very quickly, this is from Pádraig Ó Tuama, who's a great poet from Ireland, a good friend. I finished the book actually with this, so if you like it, you can buy the book. But it's beautiful. It's a nice way to end. In the name of goodness, of love, and of broken community. In the name of meaning, of feeling, and I hope you don't screw me. In the name of darkness, of light, and ungraspable twilight. In the name of mealtimes, and sharing, and caring by firelight. In the name of action, of peace, and of human redemption. In the name of eating, of drinking, and table confession. In the name of sadness, regrets, and holy obsession. The holy name of anger, the spirit of aggression. In the name of forgive and forget, and I hope I get over this. In the name of Father and Son and Holy Spirit. in the name of beauty and broken and beaten up daily, in the name of seeing our creeds and believing in maybe. We gather here, a table of strangers, and speak of our hopeland and talk of our danger, to make sense of our thinking, to authenticate lives, to humanize feelings and stop telling lies. In the name of philosophy, of theology, and who gives a damn, in the name of employment and study and finding new family, in the name of our passions, our lovings, and our indecent obsessions, in the name of prayer and of worship and demon possession, in the name of solitude, of quiet and holy reflection, the lost, the lonely, and the without direction, efficiency, stupidity, and the wholly ineffectual, the straight, the queer, the transgender, and bisexual, in the name of boot clogs and boob jobs and erectile dysfunction, schizophrenia, hysteria, obsessive compulsion, in the name of Jesus and Mary and the mostly silent Joseph, in the name of speaking to ourselves, saying, "This is more than I can cope with." In the name of touch-up and of break-up and of breakdown and weeping, therapy and Prozac and of full-hearted breathing, sadness and madness and years since I've smiled. In the name of the unknown, the alien, and the holy in exile. In the name of goodness and kindness and intentionality. In the name of harbor and shelter and family.
Peter Rollins. Friends, Peter's going to start off our morning at 9 o'clock with a second presentation. Come early at 8:45 for the gathering music, always a plus. And with music, we are going to conclude our evening together. Tonight, Peter will be signing books in the registration area, and books are available at the store. Brian.
Good evening. Have you all had a good day? Good. Well, it's my honor to close it with you tonight. So I've been asked to do a couple of songs, and I'd love for you to join me with these. So it's been a pretty full day. We've had some sad news, and I hope somewhere in there we've also had some good news and some happy news. So I thought we would celebrate both those things, to use our voices to sing and acknowledge the sadness that's happening in all our lives, in whatever manner, and then to celebrate the joy. So I'm going to offer two spirituals that you all know. The first one is called "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, a Long Way from Home." Know that one? I'm going to sing it the way I was taught by one of my teachers, Linda Tillery. I'll sing a verse and then come on and sing with me. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Sing it with me. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Let's do that one more time, and let's really feel what that feels like. Here we go. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like a moaning dove. Sometimes I feel like a moaning dove. Sometimes I feel like a moaning dove. Sometimes I feel like a moaning dove, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm already gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm already gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm already gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm already gone, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Everybody breathe. Yeah. And now we'll get into the flip side of that, into a sense of freedom and joy. Wade in the water. One of those universal stories that can speak to us all. The yearning for freedom, the intercession, grace, blessings, freedom, joy, and a sense of redemption. There's many, many things that the song brings to it. We're going to do a call and response version. So first of all, we're going to start with the chorus. So I'm going to sing it once, and I'll have you sing it back, and then I'll show you how we're going to do the verse, and then we're going to get right into it. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Sing it one time. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Good. Now when we do the verses, I sing, who's that coming dressed in white? And you sing, wade in the water. And I sing, must be the children of the Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water. So that's how the verse goes, and we're back into the chorus. We all sing it together. So please put your hands together for this one. Here we go. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the gonna trouble the world. Here's the verse. Who's that coming dressed in white? Wade in the water. Must be the children of the Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water. Said, who's that coming dressed in red? Said, must be the children that Moses led. God's gonna trouble the water. Here's the chorus now. Away in the wall, wade in the water. Yeah, yeah. God's gonna trouble the water. I would not be a sinner. I tell you the reason why. 'Cause if my Lord was to call on me, I wouldn't be ready to die. Come on, sing it with me now. Wade in, wade, wade, yeah. Wade in the water, children. Gonna trouble the water. One more time. Wade, 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 wade in the water. Oh, yeah, yeah. God's gonna trouble the water. Say God, God's gonna trouble the water. Said God's gonna. God's gonna trouble, God's gonna trouble, God's gonna trouble, God's gonna trouble the water. Thank you. Yeah, all right. More of that this week. Thank you all and good night.